Yes, just the who we are. So we are a network of researchers based in different countries in Africa as well as abroad, Canada, US, and we are our objective. We have different objectives, and one of them is it's collaboration, and between working on African issues or related. And our membership, it's not just for Africans or African born, it's for everyone who has an interest in Africa or who is working on any African related matters. Activities, we do webinars like today. We have webinars. We do webinars mainly. We also have other discussions we do. And after every webinars, we publish newsletters, just a summary of what we do. And because we have people speaking different languages, we tend to publish in French, in Russian. And these are the example of some of our webinars that we're seeing now, we've done previously. That's you are being shown now. And today, we're going to do, okay, yeah. Today event is going to be on the presentation of Jesus. So I'm going to pass it to Augustine, who is going to moderate, and I'll conclude towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mukile. So I'm going to introduce the speakers today for the discussion on titled White Jesus and Black Devil, and looking for conversation with regards to image and representation in religion, both in Africa and in diaspora, and its impacts on Africans and people of African descent in the diaspora. So for today's discussion, as Mukile has shown already, we have Dr. Cindy Davis, is the former director of education at American Culture Initiative, and the active UX director of the Igbo, which is same as Igbo Landing Project in Boston. And Dr. Sidney received his ND degree from Canadian University in 1974 after his mastery of biology, anatomy, and physiology. He worked in the US Navy for over 20 years in various capacities as a Marine Corpsman, clinical lab instructor, and chief of laboratory. And with regards to his educational background, because as we are having the discussion on academic platform, he studied liberal science at the University of Auburn and Sonny from 1988 to 1990. And he got his master's degree, master's in Jewish studies from Hebrew College, 2003 to 2010. And he was awarded Doctor of Theology in Indigenous Spirituality and African Studies. That was in Nigeria at Pilgrim University and Theological Seminary at North Carolina and Upper Campus in Nigeria in 2013. Presently, he is the director of this Afri-American Cultural Initiative, and he has served as president of Bible Sabbath Association from 1999 to 2003. So we're going to have him on board after and he's going to have a 15 minutes presentation. Then we're going to have the next panelist, who is also Reverend Father Dr. Emeka Nwosu, and he is the president of Dominican Institute of Theology in Nigeria. And after his presentation, we're going to have Dr. Emeka, and I will just introduce the speaker. So after his presentation, we're going to have Dr. Jim Paris, and then Dr. Emeka, we conclude. We take the last 15 minutes after Jim Paris. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Emeka now. Dr. Mika, as I've said earlier on, is a president of Dominican Institute of Theology. He holds his doctorate degree from the Pontifical Institute of Theology in Italy, and he teaches courses in patristic studies, and he has served as the president of Catholic Theological Association for years, which is the largest body of theologians in Africa, and is currently the president of the Institute. And then we have an artist, an art historian, an artist, a musician, and a PhD scholar at the University of Central Lancashire, who is Jim Paris. So he's going to be the second speaker, and he's an expert in African traditional arts and aesthetics. So Jim Paris has worked for many years in the world of music in the UK and in other European countries. He has also collaborated in spoken words, dance, theater, and street art. He's rounding up his PhD. He has almost defended that, so that's why we know that just for the honor to be conferred on him, because his research is the area of School of Social Work, Community and Care at the University of Lancashire. And he examined African art and aesthetics. That's why we have him on board. So to start with, I'm going to just ask Dr. Sidney Davis to take the microphone right away and have its 15 minutes presentation on the topic. Dr. Sidney.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be able to join everyone here and to participate in this discussion. I'm coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here. So, just getting our day started, so to speak. And I'm very pleased to be able to start off my day with you brothers and sisters, if you're here. Anyway, the subject, white Jesus and black devil, we want to explore, how this idea or concept came to be and what effect it has had upon Africans in particular, the world and Africans in particular. Let me start off by saying that Christianity is the consequence of Western civilization. Christianity is the byproduct, is a subsequent to Western civilization. That's the first thing that I think we need to establish. Western civilization has defined the world. If we just look at the concept of how we understand time in centuries, the time is divided between before Christ and the year of our Lord. The whole world understands millennia, the accounting of millennia in terms of BC and AD. This is not to say that each climate or each nation or culture has its own time scheme, but the Western civilization concept of time has defined the world today. All commerce and relationships are defined by the Western concept of time, AD and BC. The years, how we reckon our years, how we reckon our months, how we tell time by looking at our watches, our holidays. Christmas is practically a worldwide holiday. It's an economic holiday. Valentine's Day, almost all over the world, people celebrate Valentine's Day, which is coming up next month. New Year's Day, the whole world celebrates New Year's Day on January the 1st, the Saturnalia of ancient Rome. So this has been the reality of the world ever since the Edict of Milan in 312 by Constantine that granted toleration to Christianity, and at the same time made Sunday the national day of rest for the empire. And that idea is introduced the whole idea of what we call the weekend. The whole idea of the weekend, taking off and going home for the weekend. That's the Western civilization idea. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my audio okay? Yeah. Okay. Um, so what we see happening now, we have since, you know, I believe it's 312, with Constantine giving the Edict of Milan, the spread of Western civilization, and this continued well into the period we call the medieval period, where we have an assault on Western civilization by Islam. We know that Islam started going into Europe from North Africa, taking over Spain and ruling the Iberian Peninsula for almost 700 years. That's almost a century now, that the Muslims were in Europe, and at that time had threatened the whole European civilization. And it wasn't until the European repulsion of the Moors at the Battle of Tours in France by Charles Martel. The Battle of Tours turned back the Saracen or Moorish invasion that threatened to take over Europe and thus eclipse Western civilization. That was stopped. And from that time, the Europeans started to push back against the Moors and finally drove the Moors out of Europe, but not before the era of international trade and what we understand as slavery. So when we look at what happened in Europe with the repulsion of the Islamic intrusion or invasion, we find that during this period that the Christian Franks and the Gauls in France and the people there in the other peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, they began to vilify the Saracens, who were black. The Moors were black, and they were vilified. Not all of them were black, but most of them were black, and they were vilified in the literature as devils, because they represented a foreign intrusion into the civilization of Europe. And so they were depicted as evil. They were depicted as devils, and they were depicted as black devils because they were black, and they were a threat to Western civilization. They were a threat to Christianity. So now we have, during the same period, the expansion of Europe into Africa, the shores of Africa, led by Prince Henry the Navigator. They were able to go past the tip of the Moroccan territory in the middle of the 15th century, because sailors had failed to make explorations far from their shores because they believed that the world was flat, and if they went too far, they'd fall off and get eaten by monsters and so on. But Prince Henry the Navigator broke that paradigm, went past Morocco and discovered the Azores and the Canary Islands, and eventually came down to West Africa. But the reason why Prince Henry started his exploration from the southern portion of Portugal and Spain was because the Muslims were constantly badgering the southern Iberian Peninsula for slaves. They were getting slaves from Portugal and from Spain and taking them across to the Mediterranean to North Africa, and they were selling them into slavery. So it was trying to stop this that Prince Henry the Navigator started his sailing activities to the south, and it was to try to interdict the pirates who were taking people from southern Portugal and so on. And that is where he discovered the Saharan slave trade and all the things that they were able to achieve through trade, such as gold. Portugal was the first nation in Europe to actually get gold and make gold after their discovery of gold, going into Africa. But
The
how much time do I have left? I don't want to go too far. I want to make sure I get to the points that I want to get to. Will I have 10 minutes left? Anyway, let's come over to American slavery. American chattel slavery. it was called the peculiar institution in America. The peculiar institution because never in the annals of human history were people taken as slaves and made slaves perpetually, not only through their whole life, but their posterity, their descendants were slaves. So this happened in America. This is what made it peculiar, that if I were taken as a slave, then my children, by virtue of the fact that I was a slave, would become slaves as well, on into perpetuity. It was perpetual slavery. So that's what made it peculiar. And so we find that the African enslavement was actually the encounter of Western culture with African culture. In America, this resulted with a loss of identity, because the culture that we had, that we came with, that we had when we were in Africa was in America. This is very peculiar for America. I can't say this is the same for the other parts of Western Hemisphere, such as Brazil or the Caribbean or other places. But in America, this type of servitude and slavery was peculiar because we had to forge a new identity because we didn't have an identity. We knew that we were Africans, but the Europeans didn't look upon themselves as being white or being Europeans. They looked upon themselves as being English, being French, or being Spanish. They characterized themselves according to the nationality of the country where they came from. Blacks over here, we couldn't do that. We didn't know what country we came from. We couldn't embrace any type of nationality. The only thing we could embrace was the fact that we were Black and we were from Africa, but we didn't have any nationality. We didn't have any national identity. Our identity and our culture was effectively taken away. We were not allowed to speak our language. We were not allowed to know what our actual culture was, our religion, and all those kind of things. So we were effectively stripped any kind of African consciousness and identity, and we had to forge a new identity. And so in America, this resulted we had to construct an identity, and because we didn't have a national identity. So the African mind was, for all practical purposes, overtaken by the dominant culture in the United States or in America. And the first encounter was through the first encounter of culture, Western culture for the African American, and I might even say the same for the African, was the Bible. The Bible was the secret weapon of Western civilization in its colonization and conquering of the world. Even during the time of discovery, all during the time of discovery, when English were going around the world, discovering different places around the world and even in Africa, they always had a clergy with them and a Bible or a priest, because they had an idea that they were not only going to evangelize and take the message of the gospel to all nations, but they had this strange idea that the 10 tribes or the tribes of Israel have been scattered, and they might be able to find them in their discoveries of these ancient people. So that's why when you go over to into the Western Pacific, you find the Solomon Islands. Well, why would they call them the Solomon Islands? Because they thought they had found the children of Israel, the descendants of Solomon. That's just an example. But in any case, we had to forge an identity, and that identity came through our identification with the Bible and the identification of ourselves to the Bible through Christianity. And there are two narratives that came out of this identity, this forged identity that we got from the Bible. There were two sort of narratives. The one narrative was that in accepting Christianity, we became good servants, obedient servants to our masters. We worship Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ was the God of Christianity and the God of our masters. And if we would comply with the words of Jesus Christ and being good people, being morally good people, then we would reap the rewards of the afterlife. The other narrative was we saw the Bible as an instrument of liberation. And so we began to identify with those stories of freedom and liberation that we were reading in the Bible. And this came as a consequence of our being able to read the Bible. We started being able to read the Bible. There was a time in America that wasn't a crime to read the Bible. It wasn't something that was punishable. But that came about after the Nat Turner Rebellion in Virginia, where Nat Turner, an African slave, rebelled against his masters and started going on a crusade to liberate African slaves.
Hello, Dr. Sidney. Please press the unmute. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think the thing
Was I
was
muted
just
all that time?
Oh, you have about 2 minutes just for the first round of your discussion.
All right. Did you hear me talk about Nat Turner?
Yeah, and you stop at the two narratives.
All right, the two narratives. So the two narratives. One was the narrative that said that we would be loving and peaceful and obedient to our masters and be ethical and moral individuals and reap the rewards of obedience in the afterlife. And we were just to be good people, ethical people, moral people, good Christians. The other narrative that we got from our identification with the Bible was that of liberation. And so we find that the liberation movements that took place amongst the Africans in America, we had people like Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and so on, who led rebellions with the idea that they were carrying out a religious or spiritual mandate to free their people. Nat Turner saw himself as a Moses, excuse me, as a Moses liberating his people from slavery in the same way that Moses did in the Bible. We find these themes all through Nat Turner's rebellion. We find the biblical theme of liberation all throughout the experience of Africans in America in slavery. We identified ourselves with the experience of the Israelites. We identified ourselves with the experience of Christ, and we longed for freedom. And this is during a time, Nat Turner and the rebellions that took place around that time happened at a time when it was not a crime or there was no prohibition on educating slaves on how to read. So when Nat Turner learned how to read the Bible, he got this idea of liberating Africans from his knowledge of reading the Bible. And when you read the contemporary accounts of what happened during that time, Nat Turner was a very educated man by those standards during that time, because he knew the Bible well, he could read the Bible well, and he was a great orator and so on. He was educated by the Bible. That was the only book, the only form of education that Blacks were allowed to have access to. And so we find this throughout the experience of African Americans in America, where they embraced the Bible as part of their forging identity. so we have so the narrative that formed from the idea that we should be good people, obedient servants, and so forth. That was maintained. That idea was maintained through the doctrine of white supremacy. So white supremacy was what kept this idea sort of alive, and the other was an acquired identity through didactic learning. That is, that we taught ourselves the Bible, and encapsulated freedom and liberty through Black power. So we have white supremacy as the basis of one narrative, and then we have Black power as the basis of the other narrative that was that affected the identity of the forging of African American identity in the United States. So we have now, with the forging of these two narratives, the idea of how the white Jesus and Black devil imagery affected not only African American consciousness but world consciousness. As I say, it was the consequence of Western civilization, and we see this even today. I mean, Nigeria, for instance, is the largest market for white bleaching cream. Now, that is a consequence of the coming in contact with Western civilization. Now, we can say that it's because, well, Jesus is white and we want to be white like Jesus and be saved into the white kingdom, and therefore we want to be like that. We can say that. But as I said at the beginning, Christianity was subsequent. It was a result of, it was the encounter with Christianity was subsequent to our encounter with Western civilization. So the whole thing that we're dealing with is a clash of civilizations. It's not a clash of religions or a clash of white against Black. Out of this racial Black power narrative that came about as a result, that resulted in our rebelling and being liberated from slavery. We had, various slave rebellions. It was because of that they forbade the reading of the Bible. It became a crime to teach Blacks how to read the Bible because it gave them all these ideas. But nevertheless, this narrative that embraced the Bible as a narrative of freedom, and we embraced, we became identified with the nationality that we then began to embrace was that of the nationality of Jews, the nationality of Hebrews.
Thank you, Dr. Sidney.
Yes.
I think we just hold it for now. We would stop with you for now so that we can have the other panelists, and I know you will continue.
Well, give me 1 minute. So I want to crown this, what I just said, because this idea of embracing the Bible as our identity led to the idea that Jesus was Black. The first time Jesus was taught was Black came in the late 19th century by Black preachers. And we embrace a nationalism. Jesus being Black, we were the children that identify, or the people that identify with Jesus as Hebrews and Jews. And so that whole idea, that whole movement led to what we call today Black nationalism. What began as a Hebrew Israelite actually grew into Black nationalism. Black nationalism first began with the teaching of Black Jesus. And every Black nationalist organization in the United States, including the Nation of Islam, had its origin there. So I'll leave it there, and we can continue on this area.
Thank you so much. I wish you could hear the claps. I know people are already clapping and very happy because the perspective you have brought into the discussion is actually an enriching one from the African American point of view and your scholarly experience, like references, and how you trace the whole thing from Western civilization and how it was used and how it has regulated the calendar globally and its influence on every part of the world, not just the Black nations or Africa alone, and how the Bible was used as an instrument, it was used as a weapon, according to you, of colonialism, and especially mental colonialism, the idea that, you should be obedient, you should submit, you should conform. Sometimes we even see that when police, we have narratives of police harassing Black people, and some people will say, why don't you give the person ID card? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you obey? You know, so there's always a narrative, and you try to actually show us the roots, the connection between the Hebrew Israelites, that is to Black nationalism. And that's quite very great and impressive. And I know that the discussion will continue when we have the other panelists having their presentation. So at this point, I will hand literally the microphone to Dr. Jim Paris. I have your slides projected. So Dr. Jim Paris, over to you. Okay, probably is muted. Hello, Dr. Jim Paris. As the Zoom technology at times can be funny. This is where we find ourselves in this COVID era. So I'm sure he's trying to get his.
Can you ask him maybe to unmute himself, because
yeah, he's been asked to.
Okay, sorry, apologies everyone. Okay, thank you for inviting me. As I'm sure you know, this topic is an immensely complex one, drawing on a long list of areas, including race, colonialism, aesthetics, as Dr. Sidney's illustrated, and also comparative religion and philosophy. In this presentation, I'm going to try and briefly join up some of these many areas. Okay, so if we can have slide 2, please.
Okay.
Okay, well, from 1939, the Senegalese thinker, Leopold Senghor, reflected on the aesthetics of how the aesthetics of classical Greek and Roman art, when compared with traditional African art, could be considered the difference between an analytic type of representation and a desire to mediate and express invisible complex forces in life. And more recently, under the influence of critical theory and feminism, there has emerged a similar type of thinking about classical Greek and Roman influence for representation and portraiture. And pointedly that which developed in the European Renaissance period, okay, between the 14th and 17th centuries. So if next slide, please. Okay, wonderful. Now, according to Mary Garrard, recently, what emerges during the European Renaissance period is increasing use of perspectivalism, which is mechanical viewing of space, and then being able to copy it onto a bit of paper. But by mechanical means. I don't know if you can see that grid there. That is literally something that was invented, I think, in the 15th century, 14th, 15th century, for sure. And you know, you could see how it could work. If you have a bit of paper, you could divide a bit of paper up in the same number of squares. Okay, this mechanical type of vision, whether connected to the divine or not in its reproduction, represents a growing ocular epistemology, by which I mean seeing takes on the magnitude of knowing. Okay, the translation of that is a belief in a visual truth, a use of mathematical laws of perspective, production of images by someone thought of as a genius individual artist. You know, this visual mechanic, you could say. This type of thinking, again, if you,
he has his
Okay, sorry again. Where did you stop hearing me? Okay, we're staying on Batisti's grid. This particular grid, it puts the individual, you can see it physically at the center of knowledge, at the center of the view, the individual, and it's necessary for type of, and it's the same type of thinking of the individual at the center of knowledge is this kind of, we could almost say conceit, is in fact, Mary Garrard would say necessary for the increasing development of machine technologies. Okay, now next slide, please. Hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah. For instance, as Martin Heidegger puts it, the modern period is characterized by the rise of the subject as an individual at the center of knowledge, and Heidegger adds, the artwork becomes the object of mere human subjective experience. Okay, so if now slide 6, please. Slide 6, please. No, yeah, that's go back. Yes, that's the one. Now this is Narcissus Caravaggio, and here you literally have that. You have this kind of use of perspective. It's a very mathematical creation, and importantly, it has this point of not only is the I said conceit, not only is the individual at the center of knowledge, but he's content looking no further than what he can see, and in this case himself. So what you may be wondering, has all this talk of the early modern period and connected ideas of the individual at the center of knowledge got to do with our topic today: white Jesus, black devil, rethinking, imagery in Christianity and traditional African religion? Well, the answer comes, if we can have the next, yeah, this is great. The answer comes from looking at how, starting in this period, white male European artists are increasingly responding to what Amelia Jones describes as the increasingly aggressive pressures placed on the belief in individualism. And it's so manifest that a lot of these artists, including Caravaggio and Albrecht Dürer very famously, and many others, they're not only using models of people as models for images of Jesus Christ, they're often using themselves. They don't put self-portraits in these images. It becomes a meditation over the self in the guise of Jesus. And you can imagine this inevitably, it's a meditation on the European self in the guise of Jesus. Inevitably becomes connected with already existing ideas. If we have the next slide, please, of a need to, the next slide. Yeah, this one. Okay, of a need to, it comes in connection. This meditation on the European stuff, it inevitably comes into connection, whether politically or psychologically, and so forth, becomes connected to the need to demonize often darker skinned Jews and certainly Muslims in a very naturally a political world. And but further, it becomes connected with a need to justify transatlantic slavery and colonial imposition in regions of the world, such as Africa. Okay, so next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, now what we've got going on here is a contrast. One on the right, you've got a quote from Dr. Paul Akin Otiko, who's a member of this network. On the right and on the left is again Amelia Jones. Western representational structures render visible the fact that the world takes place purely in relation to the subjects within it. And I was in correspondence with Dr. Paul Latin of Ottigo recently, and he very beautifully said what's there on the right, and how for the African, in contrast to this Western subjects within, relations to subjects within it, for the African, what is seen can never capture what exists, just as what is seen is a key aspect of what exists. So there's a kind of, I think it's reasonable to say it's the one on the right is the more sophisticated of the two, Okay. So now the existence of this thinking behind African representational art, traditional African representational art, and in traditional African philosophy is also illuminated in the writing of the wonderful Faris Thompson's and his research. Faris Thompson regards the type of abstraction found in traditional African art. An abstraction, I can confidently say, abstraction is there's a level of abstraction is 50% of traditional African art, if not more. Found a traditional African sculpture, and Faris Thompson is talking about. He regards it as reflecting a purposeful concern for not achieving too much realism. It's on purpose. The abstraction is on purpose. Why? And now, Faris Thompson affords this really interesting anecdote on this point from his time with the Bassa people in Liberia. And in this anecdote, a carver, I kind of read it as I read it in Faris Thompson. In this, a carver loved his wife so much that when he carved a mask of a you can stay there for now. Stay there for now, please. Stay in that slide, please. Thank you. When he carved a mask for a ceremony, he loved his wife so much, but when he carved a mask for a ceremony of the peoples, the mask resembled his wife. And when the mask was first brought out for a public function, all the people instantly recognized the inspiration and recognized his wife, and they called out her name. Now, Faris Thompson recounts how the elders were really unhappy at the carver's lack of self-control, and quoting Faris Thompson, he says, "The artist had betrayed the myth of the mask, thus revealing that masks were man-made and subject to the vagaries of human emotion." Now, in my research, my work, I would say the elders, I would put it slightly differently. I would say the elders knew that the carver's own human emotions would play a role in the creation of the normally more abstract mask. However, unlike the individual-centered European cultural perspective and philosophical paradigm, which I was talking about earlier, the responsibility of the artist, the traditional African responsibility of the artist, was unambiguously to help everyone negotiate the invisible universe, or go below the surface of the pool. Okay. Now, throughout the 20th century, various thinkers, including Senghor, have been concerned to highlight Africa's contribution to the development of a great proportion of 20th century Western art. And I was influenced by this thought when in 2017, I interviewed a number of traditional healers in Cameroon.
I think, Dr. Jim,
Right,
I think you should round up.
That's fine. You can stay there. That's fine.
You should be rounding up this session.
This one is good. This one is good. Thank you.
Okay.
And for my interviews, I use a method called the photographic elicitation method, in which you simply show the person you're interviewing photographs and start the conversation that way. And I used photographs of both traditional African art objects and rituals, and also contemporary works influenced by traditional African art. And one photograph I used was of a highly geometrical abstract painting. It's this one here. highly geometric abstract painting by the British Nigerian artist Yinka Shonibare, okay? And one healer in particular was very interested in this work and gave the following words in response. Perhaps we can have the next slide, please. Yeah, these are the words he gave. So he said, I'll quickly, yes, you could take anything, any flower from a place like this. Okay, he's looking at that abstract painting. I would say this is a farm. According to what I see, this is a farm. This is something very clear, okay? This is a place that you can have anything from there with your prayer, a place like your farm. And it goes on, there are many things that are described here that you can gain from there to help. This is the tradition of a different place, okay? He's saying this art is not African art, or it's not traditional African art, but I can still use from here and go straight with them, going straight with them, with the artist, or with perhaps if he's going to heal somebody. Now, MF's explanation outlines a deep magical aesthetic conception of Shonibare's 20th century modern abstract art by denoting it as a temple where you can have anything from there with your prayer. The idea of going straight to somewhere unknown is highly important here. Going straight there is getting magical power and healing, but the there is an invisible universe, or we can say below the surface of the pool. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the importance placed on abstraction in Africa extends across many media, as you all know better than me, I imagine. But here we limit examples to masks and the human figure, just in my presentation. The central aim of this art is to, the next slide is good also, next slide. The central aim of the art that you're going to be seeing is to negotiate the invisible forces in life. To do this, it may, for instance, acknowledge an ancestor or a spirit or a philosophical religious conception or a moral exemplar. Next slide, please. And there'll be a boldness and abstraction level of abstraction, which is clear to see in this Bamoun mask from Bamoun peoples in Cameroon. Here we've got I would say a clear back please, back one. Clear possibility of a moral exemplar, but importantly, more clearly, trying to or an artwork which speaking about, should we say, a meditative state or a conjunction of, should we say, spiritual meditative possibility, an exemplar of that, reality.
Dr. Jim, I would just implore you to round up. We still have more of the discussion. Just in few seconds, just give a last closing remark. All right.
How long was that already?
I say just round up in less than 20, 30 seconds so that we can continue the conversation after that.
Okay. So anyway, if we just, I'm going to just skip to the end now, and I could do that. That's fine. So to end here, one could say that in contrast to European Christian imagery, the central aim of imagery in traditional African religion and art is to help negotiate the invisible complex forces in life, go below the surface of the pool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jim Paris. I know concerning this issue from your at historian point of view and philosophical perspective, you can spend 1 hour is not enough. So I know that we are like being unjust, but please pardon us. We just want to ensure that the preliminary discussions by the speakers stimulate the discussion with other participants and make it. So I'm just going to give a summary for those who came in while Jim was speaking. That he started by talking from the philosophical idea of subjectivity embedded in interpretation of artworks. And he used the Heideggerian framework, that's Martin Heidegger, and it was able to show that any self-portrayal or any portrayal of ideas or representation in the universe by an artist it carries along the biases, the prejudice, and sentiments, as well as all the things from the perspective of the artist. And it was able to show that not just the depiction of Jesus by Europeans, but it was able to show that even in the African artworks, which he was able to explore, the Nigerian, the Cameroonian, the West, and all the part of West Africa, and the last depiction, which we are having on board of Jesus. So we bring in the third guest speaker, who is Dr. Reverend Father Emeka Nwosu of the Order of Preacher. So it comes in and then the conversation will take place afterwards. So,
All right. Can you, I'll have to mute myself. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this webinar on the discussion, Why Jesus Black Devil. It's an interesting discussion because it highlights the complexity of Christianity in Africa, you know. But I would like to kind of clarify a few things, particularly in the light of some growing criticism from Africans and even African Christians. Oftentimes, because of the context within which Christianity came to Africa, there are a lot of some things that need to be properly clarified. While it's true that we in Africa, what we might call the Western tradition of Christianity, but oftentimes there's this identification of Christianity with European civilization, which is not entirely true. Because even long before Christianity thrived in Europe, Christianity actually thrived in Africa, particularly in the northern part of Africa. By the 2nd century, Christianity was already thriving in Alexandria, in what was called Roman North Africa. So we have, in fact, one of the earliest, you might call theological school, was found in Alexandria, the Catechetical School of Alexandria, which was headed, by Pantanius and then Clement of Alexandria. So what I'm trying to say in essence that Christianity is not identical with Western civilization. Granted that, like I said, Africans in Sub-Sahara received a certain tradition. Yeah, and oftentimes there's this conception that Jesus is white. Jesus is not white. Jesus is Mediterranean. He's Jew. He's Jew, and Jews are not Europeans. But the point remains that the idea of black and white Jesus, black devil, raises the question of color, and here we are dealing with a certain weaponization of color, which is not unconnected with the whole question of slavery and colonialism. And so that becomes, so because Christianity in sub-Saharan Africa, came within that context, there is often this misgiving among Africans generally, the whole idea of Christianity. Because but I try to look at the whole idea of particularly the representations of the images from the point of view I like to see it from two perspectives. One might call the more positive perspective and a less positive perspective. Now, the positive perspective to the representation of images is that one who represents me uses the categories of his thoughts, the categories of what he understands. It's interesting that when you look at the different icons, because particularly in the Eastern tradition, icons are very important. They're very important. If you look at the Byzantine icons, compare that with the Russian icons, compare that with the Coptic icons, and then you compare that with the icons from Ethiopian church, you will see, unique, each one has its unique features, which goes to say that, each one presents or represents according to the categories of his mind, according to the culture. And so the Europeans who brought Christianity to sub-Saharan Africa, of course, when they brought a Jesus, or the image of a Jesus rather, that kind of reflects their own cultural mind, And probably if the Coptics had evangelized sub-Saharan Africa, we will definitely have a different kind of portrait of Jesus, because they will represent Jesus, with from the perspective, with the categories of the Coptic culture. That's why I say, if you've seen the whole idea of the question of color, white Jesus, black Jesus, we must first of all look at it from that general perception of that each one captures reality according to his own reality. Now, on the other hand, we must grant also that the white missionaries, when they came, the European missionaries, when they came, they already had a certain, I say, a mental vision of Africa, which is rooted in both slavery and colonialism. And so it's easy then for them to represent, having for years, these are centuries, not just years, centuries of being told that all that is about Africa is negative, is dark, is diabolic. Of course, formed with that mental conception, it's easy for them to represent whatever that is good as white, and then whatever that is bad as black. And that's why I say that here you find what I might call the weaponization of color, the weaponization of color of black, white, black, signifying what is evil, and then white representing what is good. But if we are to remove that underpinning ideology, you find out that the idea of white, black may not, have the same kind of meaning for the black man before colonialism, before the missionaries. Why? Because I asked the question. Even even among South Africans, I mean to say, why is it that, the priestesses, for example, the priestesses of Ifa, for example, the Ifa priestesses, or most gods, how is it that they get to dress with on white, immaculate garments? I mean, if you take any of the priestesses of the gods, they usually will dress traditionally in uh, white garments, and not in black. And so, which goes to say that even for the Africans, there's a meaning attached to those colors. I know in some parts of our culture, I mean, some parts of Africa, when it has to do with death and mourning, the color will be black. But for the African man, it's not a weaponization of color. That's the way he interprets color. So, whereas when we deal with the whole idea of because when it comes to the whole idea of black devil, white Jesus, here there is already an ideological warfare going on. So that kind of highlights or rather makes it seem that everything black is negative and everything white is good. But for us, particularly in contemporary Africa, the task of deconstructing the kind of images brought to us by missionaries, that's our responsibility. But here lies in the difficulty of reconstructing or coming up with new categories of images. Why is that so? Because for centuries, the African mind, unfortunately, has been distorted. The African mind has been distorted. There is what someone calls the mental psychosis, And so even for us today, it's quite difficult when you try to present an image of Jesus that is not white. In the community where I live, we have this image of Jesus, whose features are black, or rather whose features are rather African rather than European. I know the first time that crucifix was mounted in the chapel, there was a lot of negative response, because in the mind of the people, this does not represent what or who Jesus has been or could have been told that Jesus is. So the major difficulty today is to get the African mind to accept that what is black is not necessarily what's black is not necessarily wrong or evil or bad. Dr. Sidney did mention during his intervention the fact that I think Nigeria happens to be one of the countries that imports bleaching cream. One of the countries that imports, but that goes to the fact that our minds have been conditioned to think that whatever is white is good, and so whatever is evil, whatever is black must be rejected, and that ideological warfare still continues even today. And so it's a task for, of course, African theologians have tried in several ways to inculturate Christianity, because the fact remains that Christianity, while people see that as a foreign religion, which, yes, its origin is not African, but there are so many things we today we've embraced which are not, and they do not have to necessarily emerge from the African soil for it to be embraced. And like I said, Christianity is as old in Africa as anywhere else. I've mentioned major. In fact, of all the five patriarchates during the first 5-6 centuries of the church, and apart from Rome, you have Alexandria as one of the patriarchates, of Christianity at that time. So Christianity is as old in African soil as anyone else. In fact, as a matter of fact, when centers in Alexandria and North Africa, Carthage, we are flourishing. Places like Britain, we are backwaters then. And of course, these are the people that brought Christianity, to sub-Saharan Africa. And so we must be very careful when we simply say, oh, Christianity is a foreign religion. It doesn't take full account of the historical origins of Christianity. What we do have is a Western tradition of Christianity and European tradition of Christianity. But we can today adapt Christianity to suit the African sensibilities. I know in the liturgy, we've tried to do that, to adapt the liturgy to suit the African spirit, which loves to sing, to dance. But there is a lot more that can be done, in terms of adapting Christianity, to suit the African soil, to have an African taste, an African smell, an African touch. There's a lot more to be done in that route. And so the point, the task today is to be able to take the kernel of the gospel message and then dress it up in an African garb. That's the task that for us African theologians, for us African Christians, we need to do. Unfortunately, like I said, it's a task that's a lot has been done, yet a lot more can be done. And talking about depiction of Jesus in different images, we must also bear in mind that while it's important that we represent Jesus in a kind of from our own categories of thoughts, it's important to also bear in mind that we are dealing with a historical figure. We are dealing with the historical figure who comes from a particular place with a particular kind of feature and with a particular kind of complexion. That's it. We can't run away from that fact. Otherwise, Jesus becomes a legend, and he's not a legend. He's a historical figure that has a particular kind of feature peculiar to the people of that region, the Mediterranean region, with a complexion that is not white, that is not black, but probably more of will I say dark brown or something like that. Because even today, when you a Jew of today, his complexion and features may be quite a little bit different from a Jew of 2,000 years ago, because of racial intermarriages and all that over 2,000 years. But the point is that no culture has a monopoly of representing Jesus in its own culture. Yes, while taking cognizance of the historicity of his person. Yes, every culture, in a way, has some flexibility, some room to be able to present him in a way that makes sense to the people to that culture. And this is what we see in the different icons, the Russian icons, the Byzantine icons, the icon from the Ethiopian church, from the Coptic church, and from the different places. We in Africa have to be able to present Jesus in our own categories of thoughts. And I think that for now, this is all I have to say for now on this matter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reverend Father Emeka Nwosu. And as you were giving your presentation, conversation was also responses to reactions to some of what you're saying was also coming up in the chat room. And it's so interesting, the perspective you have brought in by trying to, first of all, debunk some claims. First of all, Jesus is not European. The second one has to do with the European civilization. Didn't cover all of Africa, and prior to before they even came to Africa, some regions in Africa had their civilization. And you also explain the difficulties and the challenges that are before us. Like, yes, subjectivity has made the Europeans bring Christianity within a framework that they have presented, but it's now our duty, or the duties of Africans and African Americans, or all Africans in the diaspora, to depict Jesus in the Black image, or to strive towards the historical accuracy by depicting him as a Middle East man of his era, not as any other form of representation. So at this point, we allow, we take questions and answers. And if I check the chat room, I think Mukile, I think I can hand it over to you to actually fetch from the chat room. But if you have questions you want to ask in person, or comments or remark, you can put up your hand from the participant button. You can see an icon there to raise your hand, and then we shall unmute you once we call upon you. So Mukile, I think you can help us to fetch questions and interactions from the chat.
Okay, thanks, Augustine. There are some comments, but I think I'm the one who asked the first question. So I think Dr. Davis has also part of it, but I want to just rephrase it because we've been discussing that during the chat, and Dr. Prowse mentioned something very fundamental to me. You know, individuals are the center of knowledge. So, and I was asking in the chat, where is it that when we want to paint Jesus as Black, we have resistance? You know, we are accused of being nationalism, of being nationalist, Black power, and etc. You know, people resist. You know, and this applies to not just to white people, even to African themselves. You know, the African people who resist the idea of having a Black Jesus, they resist that. And equally, we have, for those of us who are in the diaspora, I can give you an example of Professor Robert Beckford. He did a documentary called God is Black, and he was accused of being, of racializing religious studies. So you can say even, but that happened in the UK. So we resist that, Black or white, we resist that. So it's not a question, but it's just your thought on that, because I was, someone told me, I had a discussion with someone who told me, because I think we have to move forward, but how do you, what's the solution? Because to me, it seems there's a two extreme, you know, people are resisting the category of Jesus as Black, and some of this as white. So how do we move forward? So, and I wanted to hear your opinion, because someone suggested to me, the way to move forward is to think that Jesus is teaching us to be humanism, you know, humanism. So,
okay, who are you addressing the question to?
To all panelists. It's all
okay, and please take note of that. We just take all the questions round so that we'll now be able to go from panelists to panelists. I will call on Brother Shabo, okay. Brother Shabo, to also voice to, you can unmute yourself. I've asked you to unmute Brother Shabazz.
Okay. Let me finish my question, please. So what I was going to ask is to move forward, whether Jesus is Black or white. The main thing, should we not take his teaching as the way, as a solution to move forward, because Christianity is about being, you know, loving one another and so forth. So whether it's black or white, if you're a bad person, you're a bad person. So
Okay.
what do you think? Can you just take that being a good person, being that humanism as a way forward? That yes, you can paint it as black, as yellow, as whatever, but the main thing is just to be a good person.
Thank you, Mukile, and it has been noted. I thought you presented your question earlier on before the comments, and I will enjoy those who raised their hand that we're going to call to speak, to ensure to be very brief, because we have to end this less than 15 minutes time, and then we want everyone to have their say. Brother Shabbat, can you unmute yourself? And as well
yes, can you
as
hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Thank you for the this outstanding presentations. I just wanted to say that, you know, if you go to a Ifa ceremony or voodoo ceremony, which I've been to, and then you go to a church, it's pretty clear to me that these are just two different things. You know, the music, the drumming, the centrality of women, spirit possession, even the idea of the individual. You know, in African religions, your body is a vessel for the gods and the spirits. And you're also focused on primarily about honoring the elements and creating a balance between nature and humans. These are very different concepts from Christianity. And so I just don't see how we can say that Christianity comes out of the African tradition. And so I want to say that, you know, if we're going to go forward at the bare minimum, because we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have traditionalists. I work with people in Ghana who are voodooists. If we're going to have all these things, we have to have mutual respect. And currently, the reality is that many Christians and many Muslims do not respect African traditional religious beliefs. And I think we have to start with that going forward. You have to have that mutual respect. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been noted. And the next person in the queue is Chidebere Blessing. Unmute yourself and make it brief.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I enjoyed the discussion from the panelists. Well, particularly about a comment made by Reverend Father Mosu about Nigeria being the highest the highest people patronizing bleaching cream. Please, when it comes to bleaching cream, it's personal. It's not like the people that are bleaching, they want to be white. It's a kind of beauty. They want to achieve a particular stage in their beauty, and they want to be beautiful. So that somebody comes up tomorrow and uses bleaching cream is not automatically saying that I am now good or I am now white. But because there's another aspect of beauty that that person wants to achieve. So using bleaching cream has nothing to do with somebody trying to turn to him or herself to white. Rather, there's a stage of beauty that person wants to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chidebere. She has made her own remark, and it has been noted. There are questions in the chat room, which I will read out to, and then we go for the first round of the what we call it, of the panelists responding to the reaction. But I will enjoin people to mute themselves. If we have listened to you, I unmute you before, but now you can mute yourself back. So we take the Uti. Uti, make it brief. And other people, if you don't want to speak to your question, you can just send it in the chat room, and it will be the speakers will note them. Uti, take the microphone, please.
Hello, thank you very much for a very stimulating presentation. I have two brief questions. So the first is about the reference that I think the second presenter, Dr. Paris, made about the cover and the mask. And I was wondering if that is a reference you would want to share. I think Jim Paris Farrell, you said, I didn't quite catch the name of the scholar, but I'm interested in his work and the idea of representation and the impact it has in society, because I firmly believe representation matters and narratives of representation are foundational. And then another question that I have is related to the weaponization of color And the last presenter's comment about images being represented via available categories of thought. And I was wondering whether there would be comments from the panelists about how this idea of one color as a weaponized mode of presentation, I would say, and how they are restricted only, images restricted only to what is available in the particular categories of thought of a society, how you might have seen those ideas filter into literature.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we're going to have the panelists, they have heard all questions here and there, to just take a 2 minutes round to react to them, and then we can take a second round to look at all the reactions. And so I will start with Dr. Sydney. Dr. Sydney, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. All right, well, I listened to the comments and the number of inquiries, questions. I just want to, let me just say a few words here with regard to my personal experience as an African, a Black American, and the whole idea of Black is evil and white, Jesus is white and so on, Black is evil. You know, I grew up in a segregated nation. The nation was still legally segregated when I was born. I grew up with the image of Jesus, a white Jesus, in my house, and most African Americans probably did. So I thought of Jesus as white until around the 1960s, when Black became beautiful. And, you know, Black people didn't call themselves Black in that day because that was the worst thing you can call someone, is Black. We called ourselves either colored or Negro. But Elijah Muhammad made Black fashionable. And so we started calling ourselves Black and Black and proud and so on. And we started identifying with Blackness in Africa, and we started appropriating more into our culture, images of Jesus as Black and so on. And then I became very angry over the fact that Christianity was something that was used to enslave Africans. I became very angry over that. I became very Afrocentric, and I delved into African Christianity and spirituality and so on as a reaction to my anger to white Jesus depiction that enslaved us as Africans and affected us psychologically. But I had to come to the point to where I had to stop my anger. And, you know, I went to the museum one day, went to the Egyptian exhibit for the 1st century, and I saw that all these coffins were white people. I said, why is Egypt so white in the 1st century? You know, Ptolemy and all the Greeks, and I found out that the Greek basin, the Mediterranean basin, was Hellenized. And then very much, many of the Jews were Hellenized in Palestine as well. So the idea came to me that Jesus could have been white, and I had to forgive Jesus for being white. I forgave him. And it never became an issue for me anymore. What the professor, the Reverend Father talked about Christianity beginning in Africa or having its roots in Africa is very, very true. Augustine, Tertullian, Sacco, all these great African church fathers talked about how that the religion of Christianity was ancient, that it was known before, it was nothing new to them. But we as Africans were introduced to Christianity from the Western perspective, not through the African perspective. Because the African's perspective of Christianity is much like what we understand in African spirituality. We don't realize this. The great truths that we find in the teachings of the New Testament in Jesus' words are right in African Afa Ifa. And so the discovery of Christianity, what I had to find out was that I had no reason to be angry over the fact that Jesus was white. It's immaterial. I think he was white, but it's immaterial to me. The reason why we want to make him Black is because of reaction. Not because, or we may say that the depictions of Jesus in the Bible through vision show him as being Black with woolly hair, but I'm talking about the Jesus that we think that exists in history. So I'll end there.
Thank you, and thank you so much for this passionate response. And we have a question with regards to the arts and beauty and aesthetics. And I think as an art historian, Dr. Jim can respond to that. It's really someone who is talking about bleaching from black to become white is not out of inferiority or out of seeking perfection, but is a personal choice of taking what is beautiful. Imagine. So, Dr. Jim, kindly unmute yourself to react to this from aesthetics point of view or whatever point that you have as your choice.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, but that's the ideology that Nwosu and Dr. Nwosu and certainly has already alluded to, which according to my research and so forth, the traditional philosophical thinking in Africa really transcends all of that. So and again, Dr. Nwosu has made this point. You know, the Africans and the Black people have absorbed all this problematic ideology. But if we really look at traditional African religion, the philosophical thinking, in fact, makes skin color extremely unimportant. Okay, I just leave it like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to all the questions that has been asked, and to the ones you could react to, the Reverend Father Dr. Emeka, please go ahead.
Well, let me see. Am I unmuted?
No, you are speaking. We are listening to you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just want to speak a little bit about the resistance to an attempt to incorporate Christianity to suit the African sensibility. Unfortunately, I must say that sometimes the resistance is even on the part of the leaders of the church. I mean, of African leaders, you know, unfortunately, and of course the people. There's a lot that we could inculturate and pick the best. I believe there's a lot of positive things in Africa, even in African traditional religion, that we could pick and harmonize with the Christian gospel, because what is at the core of Christianity is simply the message of Christ. That's the core, you know. And there's a lot. And in fact, going back to the history of Christianity, when Christianity left the East Palestine basin, the Mediterranean basin, and encountered the Greek culture, the early fathers of the church picked what was good from the Greek culture and then integrated it to the gospel. But that's what was, unfortunately and sadly, that was what the European missionaries did not do in Africa. You know, because like I said, they came with a mindset that all in Africa was negative. So all those rich heritage that we are in African culture, in African religion, we are all lost. And I say, for some of us who are probably second or third generation Christians and that have no immediate contact with African culture, African religion, it's a bit difficult to really recoup those beautiful, those rich traditions we have in African kitchen. And just another comment, yeah, what a speaker did mention about that, that both Christianity and Islam have little respect for African traditional religion. Unfortunately, that's true. That's true. You know, again, that comes from the view that all that is about African traditional religion is diabolic. You see, that's where it's coming from. And so we convinced that African traditional religion is rooted in devil worship. Of course, you know, it will be difficult for Christians or for Muslims to be open. More for Christians, I would say, to be open to respecting, African traditional religion. But it's a dialogue that needs to be initiated, and that will need a change of mindset. So, we need to reset our mind to accept that African traditional religion is not necessarily devil worship. That's all I have to say for now.
And thank you very much. I think the response from Dr. Emeka has done justice to some questions to, with regards to someone who asks, on what authority or proof do you assert that African Pentecostal church is straight out of voodoo or out of the, and then that's respond because he has been able to establish that the European missionaries might created a dualism in such a way that it presented the light and darkness, the devil and that of God, and anything outside what they've brought is devilish. And that's why they could easily refer to any other thing outside the Christianity they brought as maybe from voodoo or not from God. But Dr. Emeka has said that, has made it clear that most of all these things are actually wrong. And there's a question with regards to rituals that was asked, that the question of rituals, and someone also asked, does the word kemet come up one time or the other in reference to the origin of Christianity? So I would just open the floor a little bit for 1 minute final words round the speakers to, or the conversation. A lot of lovely conversation has been taking place in the chat room. And we'll just take 1 minute round, and then I will hand over to the host for the announcements of how the conversation continues and where we can actually continue the conversation. So on this point, I will ask that Dr. Sidney give us his last word, and Dr. Jim as well as, and then we close the panel.
Okay, just a minute here. You can hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, I can hear you.
I enjoyed what I learned from my fellow panelists. It's very enlightening. I wish we had another opportunity to go into this again. I mean, in deeper context. There's a lot that can be said, obviously, especially from the perspective of my experience as an African or Black American. There are many things that were touched on in the chat that I think deserve more expression or more discussion. I would really love to talk about the idea of Pentecostalism. Pentecostalism is Black American. Black Americans originated Pentecostalism. Not just Black Pentecostalism, just the idea of the Pentecostal tradition. It began with Black Americans and it spread to the whole world. It's in Africa, it's everywhere. So, and the expressions of Pentecostalism you can find it in voodoo. Now, I've always made the point, you can take us out of the voodoo, but you can't take the voodoo out of us. And in many respects, and what you see in our culture as Black Americans is an expression of our innate voodoo, our innate spirituality. And it expresses itself in our culture in many ways. So anyhow, this whole understanding about white Jesus and Black devil is very interesting, and I hope that we have another opportunity to explore these in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jim?
Yeah, just one last point. Again, this point, sometimes we're using terms like spirituality, and I think part of the challenge is to establish a very acute African understanding of the word spirituality. And again, this is the point, the ideology, the Western ideology, European stroke white, is is almost like dominating this language. And of course it's Anglo-Saxon. So this is another dimension of what must inform the debate, this same debate in the future. Here's the linguistic one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Emeka, last word.
Well, I just want to mention the fact that the differences in our worldview. The African worldview is more holistic and integral, and unlike the European that is rooted in dualism. Yeah. And so sometimes the difficulty of distinguishing what is authentic African traditional worship and what is probably what they call black magic is what is at the root at the wholesome rejection of the African traditional religion. But this requires, so there's a need for a more thorough understanding of the African worldview.
Thank you very much. And we know that this discussion needs to continue, and we have an extension of something like this moving forward. But I will hand over to the host, and I will say, as a panel coordinator, to once again thank all our panelists. It wasn't easy for them to draft the papers and to think about and to arrange how to come up with this brilliant discussion. It took months. It took a long period of time to do their research and to ensure that justice is being done to history, to philosophy, to art, as well as representation. And I love the parts that echoed through all their presentation is the idea of working on the African psychic, undoing the arms of colonialism, of slavery, and of all deliberate forms of representations and ideology. And I think the conversation continues. Mukile, I hand over the microphone to you.
Okay, thanks, Augustine. So yes, it's been very interesting. And once more, I will join Augustine in thanking our panelists. And I would like to share this link to our chat, because I know we all have a lot of questions, and it was very interesting, and we can't finish the whole discussion. So the discussion continues. Anyone who wants to ask a question, I'm sharing the link now in the chat. Okay, there you go. So the link is there in the chat. So you can just click the link, and that will take you to our chat group, and feel free to ask your question. And I'm sure Dr. Paris, Dr. Sidney, Dr. Davis, and Dr. Nyos will be happy to answer any questions, and we can continue in this way the conversation if you like. And also there's a document, let me just share this now. Okay, so we had this idea of because Africa is a continent and it's 54 countries, if I'm not wrong. So it's many countries, and a lot of those countries we don't even know about them. So we came up with this idea of having a talk, if you like, about any country, as you can see, on their Independence Day. So and then also we appreciate any contribution, anyone who has experience, they've lived there, or they are from there originally, or it might just be their area of expertise. So they can email us. So on the day of the independence of that country, they can enlighten us, because most of us, we don't know. As I say, Africa is big, and sometimes we refer to Africa as a country, which is wrong, because it's a continent. And you might be born in Africa, but we still have a lot to learn about the African continent. So that's something that if you're interested in, and on any independence of these days, you can email us about any country that you would like maybe to talk to us. So feel free to email us, okay? And our coming event, we'll just stop sharing this. Okay, I'll show you that. So this is our next event. We have sorry, Mike sharing. We have this. So let's make sure if my. Okay, there you go. So yes, just what's coming up next. We have in February. We'll have we are going to receive Dr. Ezeribe It's going to talk to us about the African perspective. So it'll be more or less a continuation of what we've discussed today, but in a different way. And then in March, we'll have a discussion on a webinar on machine interaction, language problem. And in April, we'll have Dr. Beckford. Dr. Beckford also has written extensively on religion. So, you know, and I will encourage you, if you are here today, you might want to come again to see, and it will be very interesting. So, and to contact us, we are on LinkedIn, we are on Facebook. I've just shared with you the WhatsApp group. If you want to continue, if you want to ask Dr. Paris any question, you can put it there, and we can share with Dr. Paris and or Dr. Nyonso or Dr. Davis. So we continue the conversation that way. Okay, and this is our website. And so on that note, I will pass over to Christine, who is going to close.
What about the link to those who want their profile to be on our website, and as well as to be collaborators? Do you have that link, that form that could be filled? Oh, it's at the beginning of the, you can send it to the chat. Okay, thank you very much. And we are so happy to have you. And we're going to send the link to the record, and then we have a follow-up. The easiest way to get other conversation is to just click on that button to join the chat. And then you can always reach out to us, as well as you can reach out to the speakers. You can connect you to the speakers for that conversation. On the good note, we thank all the participants and everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.